Good afternoon, everyone. Just gonna wait just a couple of seconds until people come in. Okay, I think we are really enough people to start. Welcome everyone to this roundtable event called Glitching, LGBTQ and Gender Diversity in Contemporary Gaming. This is an event that's co-organized by the Center for Democratic Futures of the University of Southampton and the LGBTQ Staff Network of the university called Pulse. We want to thank especially Adam Tasic and Andrew Landels for approaching us for this event. As you all know, this February marks the LGBTQ History Month, and this year's theme is Politics in Art. The arc is long. We have chosen this topic because games as a form of art is increasingly opening to feminist and queer audiences, and for that reason, it's also becoming incredibly polarized and politicized, with campaigns like Gamergate some years ago, which have been linked to the alt-right sphere and many other hate campaigns. So to speak about gender and LGBTQ diversity in contemporary gaming, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers here, both from academia and from the gaming industry. They will be first introducing themselves, and then they will discuss in a round table about gender and LGBTQ diversity in gaming industry. After that, we will open the floor for Q&A from the public. You can ask your questions in the chat if you want. We can read them, or we can ask you to speak and put your camera if you prefer to do so. Or you can also raise your hand during the Q&A and we'll just give you the mic. This session is being recorded at the moment, and it will be uploaded to the Center for Democratic Futures webpage and YouTube page, but the Q&A will not be recorded, so everybody can feel free to speak their mind. So I will say a little bit more about the speakers in a second, but just very briefly, we have here with us Auxanne Boch, a researcher at TU Munich, Dominic Shaw, is the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator of the UK Video Game Association, Ukie, Sally Sheppard, she's a founder and director of the London-based indie game study Wyrdren Games, and finally Vanissa Wanick, who's going to start speaking. Vanissa is a teaching fellow here at the University of Southampton in the Winchester School of Arts at the Bachelor of Games Design and Art program. She's also a member of the Center for Democratic Futures steering group. And she's also a board member of the Serious Game Society and a Women in Games ambassador, an initiative that looks to support educational efforts on widening and embedding game inclusivity. So Vanessa, floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafa. Now I'm going to share some slides. Hopefully that is going to work. 1, 2, 3. Hopefully, can you all see them? Yeah, is it working? Yes, wonderful, thank you. Right, so warm welcome to this event, and thank you all for attending. Thank you, Rafa, for the amazing introduction. So I'm Vanissa Wanick, and I'm also working here at the University of Southampton. And I look at the Year 1 students here at the university at the BA Games Design and Art. I'm also Women in Games ambassador and board member of the Serious Games Society. So for the ones that are not familiar with serious games, these are usually games that are not just focused on the entertainment, so games for health, games for learning, and the primary reason is not just entertainment, but they can be fun as well. So I've been also in contact with the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion group of Ukie, and so I know Dome through the University of Southampton as well. And I believe that games are transformative in a way. And then we can say that you can use games to tell stories and showcase ideas. that really reflects, that actually really reflects what I've been doing in terms of research as well and teaching on a daily basis. So we need to think which stories we want to be telling, right? So a little bit of context, I know that Rafa already mentioned. So we're talking about the History Month, and I would like to just explain how that would fit in terms of games. So 2022 is actually an important year, and as you see, is the 50th anniversary of the very first Pride March in the UK in the 1972. And this year's anniversary is one of a continuing and often widening journey towards full equality, which has suffered many setbacks while still moving forward. So we're being, especially in the main History Month, talking about the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So the arc is long, as you can see there in the slide, is the main tagline of this particular month. And then now merging with games. And then games not only relate to the topic, of course, you see games in an art form, but games are also considered as a form to discuss ideas and, as I said, tell stories. So what stories do we want to tell? And just to give a little bit of context as well. So in terms of the UK games industry, this is a scenario, and this is good to bring the context. I know that Duncan mentioned something more about this at some point, but this is from the census from 2020 from the Ukie, and 21% of people working in the games industry in the UK are LGBTQ+, and there's a significantly high proportion of LGBTQ+ workers, and then as you can see, 2% non-binary representation in UK games industry workforce is higher than the national average, and trans people make up 3% of the games industry workforce as well, higher than the national population. So this brings us to the context of our games industry, and it reveals the complex and unique makeup of the games UK workforce that really requires attention. And then there are some key challenges that the industry must also understand and address. So hopefully we'll be able to discuss some of these today as well. And of course, so I think it'll be also important to explain what we also do here at Winchester School of Art, which is part of the University of Southampton, and what we do at the BA Games Design and Art program, particularly because one of the hashtags that I mentioned there today is educate out prejudice. And here I will use some of the words also from our program leader, Adam Proctor, as well, because we see it as a combined vision. So diversity has been key part of what we have set up in the games program at WSA since the 2013. And we developed a program that uses design thinking and making through the lens of games to tell stories, provide emotional experiences, and it's not just focused on the technology. So we aim at manifesting ideas in form of game artifacts. So what we do in the program is some simple but deliberate things. We make very sure that all our decisions include diversity. We, as a team of staff and our students, are also made aware of the unconscious bias that can creep out into our everyday life, and so we take deliberate actions to combat this. This can be as simple as adapting the language that we use as well as images, and we make sure that our text is gender neutral. At open days as well, and interview days, we ensure diversity of students that are represented from games on campus. A key really is to write projects that will have broad appeal and provide excellent learning. So we create and encourage projects within our modules that talk to or are about themes and ideas, not just about technology or skills directly, and then our students need to work in teams as well. So in general, as you can see in the images there, I'll just put into bullet points, but this is what we normally do. There are some links there, I'll also put them in the chat. So in sum, we took these aspects to build this amazing event for you today, and I hope not to take too much of your time, and then now move to our fantastic speakers. So I'll leave the floor now to Rafa, who will be introducing our speakers. Yeah, Rafa, yeah. Ready? Okay, I'll stop sharing my slides then. Hopefully that will work now. 1 second. Stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. So the first speaker will be welcoming today is Dominic Schull. He serves as the first Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator for the UK Video Games and Interactive Entertainment Trade Association, Ukie. He manages their flagship diversity initiative, Raise the Game Pledge, and supports efforts towards the Video Games Ambassadors Program with Into Games. Tom is also an ambassador for the UK's national autism research charity Autistica. He proudly identifies as autistic, dyslexic, and LGBTQ individual. Thank you, Tom. Dom.
Thank you for the warm introduction. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I don't need to give the beginnings because Ralph has already given that. So I very much am very eager to kind of get into the discussion aspects, because I think for myself and everyone on the panel, these themes that we'll be discussing today are so important. As Vanessa's already shown, the games industry is very receptive to the LGBTQ plus community. From other pieces of data and resources that we've seen across the wider nationwide research community, it's estimated that 93 to 97% of the overall UK average are heterosexual identifying. So the fact that within that large number of percentage, the games industry is able to achieve 21% people identifying is beyond amazing from a stat perspective, but also as a community perspective. So people feel like actually there is a place, and it's so important to have that sense of inclusion, especially over the last couple of years where the lockdown has presented opportunities, but it has also presented barriers depending on circumstances. And it's so vital to make people feel included. One of the pieces of work I do is, as mentioned, is the Raise the Game initiative. And it is an initiative that's all about inspiring, empowering and amplifying the games industry's long-term commitment to diversity and inclusion across the UK, but also wider if we can inspire it. One of the key kind of activities that we do is put on activities and events ourselves. So last year, one of my proudest events that we put on was a series called Pride Chats, which was, it didn't happen all in June. It went across the entirety of the summer up until mid-August. And the highlights of that kind of event series that we put on was to show that actually conversations about important matters to the LGBTQ plus community doesn't happen just within a month. It's 365 across 12 months a day / year importance. And that's, again, something that we push through in all forms of diversity through our Raise the Game initiative. Every piece of diversity deserves its own kind of look into and specialism, but equally coming together and the intersectionality of inclusion is how we create a better society and change attitudes and make people feel more included, because actually, you know, we are not just one thing, we are a mixture of things. I mean, a big important thing about why I always say to people I'm autistic, dyslexic, and I identify as LGBTQ plus is because it's fundamentally already says, like, I am already several things and they all make up me. And you know, the amazing thing is all of you who are watching, everyone in the panel, is a wonderful and weird mixture of amazingness. And I think what's really lovely about these kind of celebrations like LGBTQ plus History Month is that we can not only celebrate the present, but we can also look to the past and see what's actually allowed us to be able to be so positive, or at least look forward to things to come, because the history that we have in the UK is quite a detailed one and quite an impactful one across the globe, when we think that other places do not have as much embedded history as the UK does around LGBTQ plus rights and inclusion. But I will save some of that, more of that conversation for later when we are all talking. So I just wanted to kind of highlight Raise the Game, say a bit about where my stance is, and thank you again for having me here, and I'm looking forward to the rest. So I'll now pass on to whoever will be the next speaker who will introduce themselves, or Raf will introduce and they will speak forward.
Thank you, Dom. That was really, really nice and inspiring. We will welcome in now Auxanne Boch. She's a researcher and doctoral candidate at the Institute for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence at the Technical University of Munich, and she explored AI ethics topics relating to social robotics, cultures, and governance. She holds a specialism in cyber psychology, and she also investigates the importance of diversity in video games, motivated by the belief that they can have a significant and positive impact on society. And like Vanissa, she's also a Women in Games ambassador. Welcome, Auxanne.
Thank you for the great presentation. So hi everyone. I think Rafa said a lot already, so I'm just gonna start sharing my slides. Bear with me for a second. There we go. Yeah, so that's me. I'm a lot of things and I have a lot of interests, but one of my main interests is video games and society. So how can video games make society better? And how social robots can make society better. So that's how everything intertwines. I am a doctoral candidate at the TUM, Technical University of Munich, Women in Games Ambassador, researcher at the TUM Institute for Ethics and AI, and also Beyond Fellow at the AI Future Lab in the Team for Earth Observation. As Rafa said, I have background in psychology or cyber psychology. Basically, that's interaction between humans and machines. So machines include video games, and that's what I focused on during my master's. If you want to reach out to me for any reason, please feel free to use my email. Otherwise, I'm putting in the chat my Twitter. I am really reachable on there. So today I want to tell you about the games themselves, because we've been talking about industry and that's a really important point. I'll circle back to it. But I wanted to introduce you, for those of you who are not aware of this, to some theories around why it's important to have representations in game. There is a theory that is literally called the gay button. It says that in a game, you can turn on or off at your will the presence of LGBTQ+ representations. I can give you a really good example of that. If you've played The Witcher 3, and it is a really played game, so I'm going to guess some of you have, if you go to a side quest with a hunter and you pick the right discussion points, then you will figure out that this hunter is gay. And this is the gay character in The Witcher 3. So this is one of the really good representation of what the gay button is about. It is this idea that in our video game environment, at this point, there is not as much representation as there should be. And why do we care? We care because representation is power. You need to have representations in games if you want to change society. And again, this is what I believe is the right thing to do. But again, just my personal opinion. Here is the theory behind that. When you play a video game, you will more or less identify with the avatar you're playing. If this avatar belongs to a specific group, LGBTQ+ groups, or else, then your opinion about this specific group might change due to your experience as a character belonging to this specific group. I can give you a really clear example. Another big game was Detroit Become Human. And in this game, you would play an android character. I've done an experiment with this game and people playing Kara's chapters 1 and 2. So Kara is an android. And chapter 1, you just do a tutorial. So you go around and you will do the tasks that a home android would do. And you figure out that the environment Kara is working in is not that great. Her, how do you call that? The person that owns her, I guess, is really tempered, if we can say. And then chapter 2, your carer, and now you know how to play, you know your place, and you have to break the code and to go save a little girl. And just by playing those 2 chapters, people change their opinions about androids and about technology in general, their trust they had in technology, just because while playing an android, you would actually, well, see from a different perspective. So this is a fictional situation, right? Because we're talking about androids, we're not there yet. But those experiments have been done with other types of populations. And it includes Mexican immigrants into the US and you playing a border vigil or border policeman and allowing them to enter or not. Allowing them based on knowledge. So you would learn that those people have families, those people have kids, those people have needs. And this changed the player's opinion on Mexican immigration. So games have a power. There is no doubt there. And they can impact society and they can impact the people who play them. And I do hope we use it for the right ending. So now the questions that we need to ask, circling back to industry, is that in the industry and in the games, there is a lot of non-masculine representations, right? We talked about the UK that have an amazing statistical representation, right? But this is the UK. If you look at numbers in other countries, you would see that we're not there yet. And this means, well, what does this mean for the game culture? Because the people that create the game, are they diverse enough to create diverse enough games? This is the first question. And how does the industry lack of diversity impact game content, which in return impact the gamers in their inside and outside of game behaviors? I say that because, as I've presented to you, an in-game experience might impact an outside of game behavior. So it's really important to ask this question. Gamergate has been mentioned already, so I'm not going to go back to that, but it shows that there is an issue, and we know that in online communities, there is some issues. So that's the question I want you to ask yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Auxanne. Finally, we're going to go to Sally Sheppard. She's founder and director of the London-based indie game studio Wyrdren Games, which was established in 2020. This studio is dedicated to making inclusive games for a diverse audience and strives to create a working environment where talent can thrive. She's also a Saving Our World champion, helping foster worldwide mental health awareness within the video game industry, and she's also another Women in Games ambassador. Welcome, Sally.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to do the same and hopefully share my screen. Let me, hopefully, has that worked?
Yeah, all good.
Brilliant. So I feel like you've done a really good job of introducing me there, so I'll kind of hold off talking about myself and instead I'll talk a little bit about Wyrdren Games, which is the company I founded, and a little bit about this game that we're making at the minute, because I feel like that maybe has some ties through to what we're talking about. So Wyrdren's an indie company. We're very, very small, boutique, but that gives us a lot of power. It means we have a lot of directions that we can take that maybe bigger companies wouldn't want to take the risk on. And I feel like that puts us in a really good position. The reason I named Wyrdren Games is, even if you're just looking at the logo on the screen here, that symbol in the middle is the symbol for Wyrd, which is a Norse symbol for destiny. And the games that we make are branching narrative in which the player gets to choose their own destiny and write their own stories. So Wyrd and Ren means family, so we are the destined family. And I feel like if you are part of the LGBT community, you probably know already that chosen family is hugely important, and having a good support network and being able to make your own choices is a privilege sometimes. So that's kind of where Wyrdren started. It's making games for people who were previously underrepresented, and yeah, just making fun games. So at the moment, we're working on Spellbound Magic Within. As I said, this is a branching narrative. in which you are a trainee magician learning to harness your powers. So we have a pretty cool host of main characters. These are all characters who have different powers, and through the game you kind of choose who you want to be your ally and your guide as you learn to kind of enter this new world. From my own experience, I tried to use a lot of subtle metaphors. So you'll probably see in the game there's a lot of links to being inside of a community like the LGBT community, and being a trainee magician and kind of entering a new world, learning about your own power and a little bit of self-identification. Yeah, I just thought I'd include some cool slides of gifts and things. Basically, it's branching narrative and it's a lot about choice. Tried to have a relatively diverse host of characters. It's a pretty easily accessible game. There's no kind of skill cap. Like a lot of first-person shooters, you have to actually have good hand-eye coordination, and if you're like me, I don't. So I wanted to make a game that was really easily accessible to most people. There's text-to-speech, so even if you are dyslexic or have any sort of issues with reading, you can still enjoy and immerse yourself in the story. And the branching narrative means that you get to put yourself at the heart of the story and make decisions. Yeah, and that's really about kind of the games that we make. So yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this talk and answer some of the questions about what we in the industry and we as indies can do, and the spaces that we can kind of make room for diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Sally. This looks really nice. I really want to play now. So now is the time for the roundtable. I think Vanissa will take from here on. Right, Vanissa?
Thank you. Wow, amazing. Yes. Well, let's move to the questions. Thank you so much. Right, so we have the first question of the round table. We have 3 questions, but I'll start with this one. Might sound like a long question, so I might put maybe in the chat. Rafa, what do you think? Put in the chat as well that question? I can do that as well. Yeah,
that's fine.
So the question is, what is the biggest challenge facing us about gender and diversity in the game industry today? And if you could give an example of this. So maybe we should start, I don't know, who would like to start or just leave it open? And maybe we can just go around.
So just to make sure I heard correctly.
Yeah, I'll post in the chat.
One positive or one negative?
The challenge, it could be a positive and negative as well, but yeah.
I could definitely go first.
A challenge.
I could definitely go first. So what's the biggest challenge facing? Okay.
Yes.
I would definitely say one of the biggest challenges facing gender and LGBTQ plus inclusion is general senior leadership. There isn't much diversity in senior leadership currently in the games industry. There are some companies that are slowly changing it, but if we're going to be very transparent, it's a slow process just to get women into these leadership positions. And part of the reason why that is, it's kind of, there's multiple reasons, but from what I've seen over the last 2 years, there's a traditional sense of business when you're at the top for leadership. And some of those businesses don't want to let that go, when actually it is about embracing and kind of incorporating this kind of new insight around EDI that would benefit these businesses greatly. But that's not to say that every business is like that. There are some really good companies that are actually slowly integrating diversity within their leadership and are doing it really well. And then the issue becomes, how do we bring people into leadership more comfortably? Because what we see from the other end of the spectrum, or the companies who are doing it really well, is that those that want to become leaders are either pushed to it too soon or pushed to it too late, where then they become leaders elsewhere. So the important kind of challenge from what I see of it is, one, you've got to, and this is always a challenge with anything diversity and inclusion, is you've got to convert the unconverted on one side of the spectrum of saying, you know, this is the power that this can do to your business, because it is. I mean, just looking at Sally's game, like the amount of characters already present in that game compared to a lot of other games is much more diverse. And even if you yourself like don't see yourself like currently, like there is such a nice variety already present within the game that it's just like, actually you'll learn new experiences, new perspectives, and you'll have a greater player experience. So already from a business perspective, Sally has already demonstrated a wider reach to different audiences. And I think a lot of these kind of senior leaders in those gaming companies that aren't convinced don't see the business benefits as clearly. And the sad thing is that they are very stubborn sometimes, and unless you're at their level, they don't listen. So it's trying to convert them. But then the other side of it is with the companies that are slowly doing the good work and bringing diversity into their leadership, the key aspect there is how do we create inclusive leadership training that comfortably puts those that want to be leaders into those positions. Because I think a hidden thing that we don't talk about generally in the industry is that some people take up leadership roles just because they want to get more money, and that's nothing bad. Like, that's a great thing. But I think sometimes we need to acknowledge that some people want to be the leaders within teams and run and manage people and lead them. And those are the people who generally end up endorsing and bringing in greater diversity because they're encouraged and they feel motivated to lead people. While there are some people who are put into that position and really they just want to manage a resource. They want to have the fundamental leadership criteria of leading a resource their way, but then they've also been told, oh, you have to lead this team as well because you have to. When actually you could have a resource leader who resources the direction of a product, and then you could have a people's leader within that same team. So fundamentally, you're not only splitting the workload and relieving people of stress, but equally you're putting people who want to be the leaders into those positions, and you're giving them potential training, while you're also creating a new branch of work that's not only open to those that don't feel comfortable with leadership, but there might be some people who want to take a much more, they want to do the great work, but they want to comfortably do it quietly. Because I think another hidden aspect about our, when we think about LGBTQ plus specifically, is people who are in the closet. That kind of trait and that aspect of hiding yourself away can apply to other forms in your life as well. And I think what people don't see when it comes to the job is that some people actually really thrive on working on things, but when they're forced to say, oh, you have to now be in this spotlight video, or you have to lead these teams, then they feel lack of confidence and it just drains them. So actually, if we kind of make sure there's inclusive training for the other half of those that want to be leaders, but also think about how do we diversify that pathway into leadership, people will feel more comfortable and will be able to authentically get greater diversity into leadership, because people who want to be there are there, and the people at the top will be encouraging those who want to rise up for people's roles to go up. But equally, it doesn't prevent people who want to do more management around assets and resources to also grow in seniority, but equally know they don't have to then suddenly gain marketing and people skills that they may never have really wanted to develop. So again, it's being inclusive to people's skill sets, but also creating more options and variety within our career paths, which again also should apply into our representation. But I'll leave it there so the others can speak.
Thank you, Dom. Right, Sally, your then.
Yeah, I can. I think in terms of game deving and making games, the biggest challenge we face is not having enough diversity, A, inside of the industry, and then B, on screen for players to see themselves. I think that for me, that's the biggest challenge. And it's such a weird one for me because I did a game design degree and 50% of my class was female identifying. And yet when that translates to industry numbers, it's not the same. So it's not that we don't have talented, diverse game devs, it's that they're not getting those roles inside of industry, even at a junior level, which would then give them that opportunity to level up through into management. And it's one of the reasons I ended up forming my own company, was the roles I was being given. I was a concept artist in the industry before I started my company, were great, but working on other people's games where there was no inclusion or diversity or pushing anything forward, where it was games we'd seen before and it was just a reiteration of the same thing and the same thing, I was like, no, actually, I feel like I should just believe in myself and have the skills to do it. But I know there are other female game devs out there who maybe wouldn't take that risk. And it is a risk to put yourself out there and be like, actually, I'm going to go do something. So we need to make it easier for them to do that, to either take that risk or join groups of people who are already taking those risks and add their talent to that pool. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, is not being able to see yourself represented, and then by not seeing yourself represented, not feeling welcome in the dev side of things, and then therefore not being able to help shape those decisions. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the more representation we have on screen, the more people will actually want to make games. And that's always a good thing, because I feel like everybody has a point of view, and the more voices we can get in the room, the more diverse and interesting and almost, to make this cold and callous, but the more interesting stories you can tell, the more sellable you make your game. It's not the same thing that's happened before. It's new and interesting. So yeah, I think more diversity is our challenge.
If I can just add to that quickly. So I'm not an expert in the industry numbers at all. This is not my expertise to take it from someone that is external to all that. There is, when we talk about diversity, I think that, of course, gender, LGBTQ+, those are big points of diversity. But I also wanted to highlight Native people, for example, Native populations, ethnic groups, cultural groups, and all those diversities as well. And I just want to say that maybe that's also somewhere that we want to look at and a place to grow. I've had discussions about games being built on specific cultures without anyone from that culture being in the design. And this is appalling in my opinion, because how do you represent a culture without anyone being able to let you know if that's exactly what it's about? So yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I think I had another question that I think you've already answered. Very similar. So I have another question actually that Auxanne, you mentioned in your slides, and I'm going to put here in the chat as well for us. So the next question is, do you think that we should include in the education at school level explanation of how diversity could be a positive thing on many levels?
If I can jump in, education is a bit more my thing. Yes, I believe that we should educate people at the earliest possible. In general, as a rule, if you think that people should know something, don't expect them to know it, teach it. And if they already knew it, good stuff, then it's reinforced. If they didn't know it, well, there you go. You did something good. So I believe that, as Dom and Sally said previously already, there is a lot of good things coming from diversity, whether it is for the games themselves, but also from a business perspective. There is a lot of different levels where we can see a positive aspect to including more diversity and in the company and in the games. And if this was taught with data, with scientific background early on, I believe this would change a lot of things. So please add diversity classes in video game makers curriculum. That would be amazing.
I'd absolutely agree to that. Kind of one example in my own background is in our final year of university, and we did a unit called Tangible Play, which was all about looking at accessibility within games. And the fundamental learning from that is if you do all the accessibility planning during pre-production, you can incorporate into your game, but equally set time into the schedule to bring in people from those backgrounds that you're trying to cater to test and give you feedback, which is kind of a bit on the representation side that you mentioned previously. But I think it's so important that when people say, oh, can't get them in, or our team's already big enough, it's like, well, you can set aside time with charities, other advocacy organizations, and bring people in, but to kind of focus on the question as well, 100% it's important to get that kind of in place early. I mean, I kind of wish that like there was a class in high school called adulting where you just learn how to do taxes and all that. So equally, I think I absolutely agree where there should be kind of in the curriculum, within at least games curriculum, there should be a module or some kind of games design project that incorporates inclusion. Kind of another example of what we did last year is we did an online game jam, and we based it around the Raise the Game pledge, where we tasked our Ukie Students Network to create an inclusive game. And what was really nice about it is actually loads of the students actually came up with some really good ideas. I'll find the Etsy page for it and kind of post it in the chat. But there was one particular game that really kind of grabbed me really nicely, and it was a game that was about frogs racing on cars. But the really nice thing is that you could customize the frogs in different colors. So again, even though frogs are not humans, you could still bring a sense of variety and choice and customization to them. And it wasn't just like red, blue, it was pinks and purples. So the students actually incorporated a really nice mixture of colors. And, you know, we forget that even the simplest of things kind of relate and almost tell a story in itself. Like, you know, people would look at me and go, your favorite color's red or green, isn't it? And I'm just like, no, pink. Give me pink. I want pink. And that's the kind of same in games as well. We want that representation to feel included, to feel there. And I just love the fact that they took this thing and they kind of incorporated an aspect of, oh, people are included because they get to choose whatever color they want. But equally, they also incorporated some really good accessibility into it as well, around the controls and stuff. And it's just simple things like that, that's like brought to the student level, that can inspire them. And I think as the games industry, I know currently a big thing for the games industry is interacting with more primary schools and high schools to inspire talent early on. And I think it's so important that the overlaps of diversity and education are strengthened so that those conversations can happen with kids, so that those kids can not only be inspired to get a career in games, but know that actually their backgrounds and their stories are important to acknowledge and embrace. Because as you mentioned before, Sally, like the amount of stories that people generally have are much more creative than some of the stories we might end up getting. And obviously, you know, to give some slack, it's understandable. Some teams are in over the hundreds and they've got big budgets, but equally, at the same time, there are developers of all sizes, including some here, who prove that actually that greater inclusion in the design can actually do great wonders and make people feel warm inside straight away.
To kind of piggyback off of your point, Auxanne, I think we're in a really, really good place at the minute. We're actually, the younger generation are actually kind of showing the older generation the way forward. I've had some amazing interactions at conventions in which I've had some brilliant conversations with some very young students who are like, this is what I think the games industry should look like. Here's where I think diversity should be. And you stand there mind blown because they're just so eloquent and they know their minds, and it's incredible. I've even had conversations at games conventions where they've kind of looked at my signage, and I usually use the host of characters in my kind of splash artwork. And I had maybe a 13-year-old ask me, can you tell me the characters' names and what their pronouns are? And I was like, amazing. The fact that that would even come into their mind to think to ask. And, you know, we got to go through what all of the characters' pronouns are, and we do have non-binary representation in our characters. And they were amazed, and they were like, oh, amazing. I love that we have they, them pronouns. And it was like, it's awesome to see this younger generation come up, and it's already normal. And it's already, you know, in their vocabulary, and they're already thinking about asking these questions. So absolutely, at a younger level, we should be introducing these ideas and talking about them. And just to bring in a second point, I think when we're looking at minority representation, I think at a school level, it's also about encouraging them. Because when I was at school, I thought game design was all about maths and science and computers. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm smart enough or if I'm going to ever be able to wrap my head around programming. But actually, there are so many tools now. There's so many Game Maker and Unity tutorials and Unreal Engine tutorials that actually you can make a game very, very simply with almost no programming background and really start to get the ball rolling, even if it's just a demo, and then maybe you bring in a programmer later to update it. Telling these diverse stories and making it accessible to everybody to make games at primary and high school level, that's what we need to be doing, is showing that everybody can make games.
And also just to quickly add on to that, I just wanted to insert as well, there are slowly we're seeing initiatives start to encourage that story as well. Two I'd like to just do a shout out to is Code Coven, who create boot camps around Unity and using Unreal Engine to inspire female and marginalized gendered individuals that they can actually get a career in games, and actually show them those tools and those resources to make it easier. And then equally, there's a program called Limit Break Mentorship, which is all about introducing talent that wants to get into games, or talent that's just started into games, meet industry professionals who can bring forth kind of, again, as the name says, mentor them, but also answer questions. So I just wanted to add that. Sorry to cut you off.
And just quickly, I wanted to say to Sally, this is really funny that you had the stereotypes in mind, and that today you fight stereotypes. So that might also be something we want to implement prior to entering game school, as you said, show everyone that they can build a game. It's not about gender, it's not about anything. It's about, do you want to learn how to build a game? Yes or no, and that's all you need.
Absolutely. Amazing responses. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Oh, I can't believe we're just nearly almost not completely at the end, but I think we're having so many amazing discussions. I have another question. I'm going to put you in the chat as well. And so it's, what advice would you give for individuals and game industry members to be more gender inclusive and embrace diversity? I think it's a sort of a general question, really, but we've already answered some of this. But yeah, what advice would you give? So something you could say, what would you say?
I can, I don't know if Dom wanted to go first or... I think the thing that I would say in terms of industry members who might be watching or listening, character creators are so important, and the amount of games who have options that are gender locked is ridiculous. And it's much easier from a development point of view to allow everybody to choose every option than it is to lock certain options off. That actually takes more development time. So if you're an executive or somebody who's making these decisions but maybe doesn't understand how that works in a programming sense, it's actually harder to lock out options and stop players from choosing things. Just let players choose. Let them have that representation. It's super easy to include pronouns. It's super easy to allow all facial features and skin tones and hair colors and facial shapes to be accessed. than it is to lock things off. So character creators are hugely important, and your player wants to immerse themselves in a world. Games are a way to escape reality while also facing stuff that we face in real life, but maybe with a sword or magic and being much more powerful than we feel in real life. Just let people choose how they want to look, who they want to be, and the stories they want to tell. And that's kind of my big takeaway from this. If I can give anyone advice, just let your players have access to things. Please stop blocking them.
Absolutely agree to that. And I think what's also interesting is if someone came back and said, oh, but what if our players want to kind of have a set identity? I think South Park kind of showed this best, is that all it takes is just an additional length to your customization wheel. So as Sally said, all those customization features reduce the time of development, and all you got to do from a player perspective is possibly say have one that has a gender wheel that might be just male, female, non-binary, trans. Like, it's just adding that options and that choice. And I think if it's, higher execs said, oh, we've got to do this, it's like, yeah, you don't need to do that. Actually, it's much more better to bring that choice. And I thought, I won't say the game, but there's a game that lacks body diversity and has such better options in terms of clothing for female characters. And I'm sometimes just like playing the game and I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to be transparent. Pokemon. I wish Pokemon had, I love Pokemon, but I wish it had greater body diversity. And I wish instead of being, are you a boy or are you a girl? Could it just be, that's something you insert later, but allow you to have all the options, because I would still like choose a more boyish look, but I absolutely, some of the clothing that the female character gets, I want that. And it's just like, oh my God, why can't I have it? And, it's something that should happen. And that was on that take. But in terms of what I also want to add, and these are very two simple things, but straight away, everyone, regardless where you work, can already make a step to gender inclusion by just putting your pronouns in your email signature or on your LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn even provides the option now to put your pronouns. So by kind of presenting them, you're not only allowing those who identify differently to know, oh, they actually understand and want me to feel comfortable and actually want to know my pronouns. So it's not only making it more inclusive for people before they even met you, but it makes it a standard across the industry and hopefully all industries. I mean, I'd say that's one for everyone, but just for specifically looking at the games industry, because if we tackle all industries, it might become a bigger challenge, at least a bigger rant. But I think for games industry companies, including those pronouns in your signatures and any of your professional profiles is very easily done, especially when some platforms just give it to you on a plate. Twitter just needs to do that now, because it would also save me some characters in my bio. So I'd love Twitter to incorporate that feature. And the kind of the other way of also just instantly being inclusive to gender and LGBTQ plus is using gender neutral language. And this is really easy to do as well. Literally, you can just put gender decoder or gender neutral language into Google, and it presents you some resources and free tools that basically are like word spell checkers, which just look through your wordings and go, oh, this is very masculine or very feminine wording. This is how you can make it gender neutral. Or if you're using a specific gender decoder, it would obviously look for more masculine wording, which again, it's not, I haven't got the specific data, but it's proven that when it comes to the application process, many more women and marginalized gender folks are put off by masculine wording in job ads, which could easily be avoided by the company kind of highlighting more about their kind of skill matrices. And when I say skill matrix, it's like the particular skills they look for at all levels and demonstrating it at all levels, so people feel more comfortable to go, oh, I actually have that skill. oh, I have potential to grow that skill, I should apply for this. Because I think that's another big thing that pulls people off, kind of a mixture between thinking about recruitment and retention, is that people don't see it enough in present. So it's not only important we have that representation within our games, but we have it in our websites and our job ads, because it's so important to feel people included so they want to come in the industry, but it's equally important to do it in the industry so those who are in the industry feel, oh, I feel included. I want to retain my status in the industry and make a career out of it, because you know, if we're again to be transparent, the industry is known for having not an amazing length of time for people to stay in it past the 5-year mark. That is slowly changing. I'd definitely say the last like 10 years has helped that by a margin. I wish I had a little data machine where I could just get the figure for it instantly, but there's just so much that can be easily done through including pronouns in your profiles and using gender neutral and inclusive language, that it would help a lot of the day-to-day interactions and thus encourage the long-term change. That's my spiel.
Yeah, if I can add anything to that, I would just say when you recruit people, if we're talking about a recruitment situation, we're having this question being asked when it comes to AI used for recruiting, right? So artificial intelligence used for recruiting. So we're looking a lot at gender bias and bias in general in recruitment. Spoiler alert, there is an enormous amount of bias. When you recruit someone, gender is definitely one of those. I would say just, you know what, don't look at those things. I know names cannot really be hidden when you do recruitment, but maybe as human beings, we have a capacity to go around our bias, our innate bias, if we acknowledge them. Let's do it. You know, let's use our superpower as humans and not be just animals, or be the best animals, if we can say. Go over all that. And yes, after that, I'm not sure there's anything more I can add to the amazing answers that have been given.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. I think we also had some contributions in the chat with links and everything. Fantastic discussion so far. So thank you so much. I think these were the main questions that we had set for the round table. So maybe, are we ready to move to the Q&A? We have a couple of questions there as well. Rafa, what do you think?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.